250,000 Homeland Security workers went to work today without knowing when they'll see their next paycheck, because the Senate has turned funding the government into a proxy war over election integrity and the culture clash.
And if you're flying anywhere this weekend or waiting on federal disaster relief, you are going to feel it.
We are now past day 35 of a partial government shutdown. Today, a procedural vote to fund the Department of Homeland Security failed, 47 to 37.
Which, just to be clear, means they didn't even get the 60 votes needed to start debating the bill, let alone pass it.
Right. And to understand why, you have to look at what is attached to the funding. The DHS appropriations are currently trapped beneath the weight of something called the Save America Act.
This is the legislation that would require mandatory proof of citizenship, like a passport or a birth certificate, to register to vote in federal elections. Former President Donald Trump has made this his top priority for the November 2026 midterms. He effectively told Republicans that passing this is a political necessity.
But the package doesn't stop there. Republicans have also bundled in bans on transgender athletes competing in women's sports. They're also pushing strict prohibitions on transgender medical procedures for minors.
Think of it like trying to pass a budget to keep the lights on in your apartment, but your roommate won't agree to pay the electric bill unless you also sign an entirely new set of house rules governing who can come over and what you can watch on TV.
And the Democrats' response to that is effectively, we aren't signing the new rules, but the apartment still needs power. Democratic Senator Patty Murray of Washington put it this way on the floor. The only reason these workers are going without pay right now is because Republicans are holding their funding hostage so they can try to give ICE even more money.
Which brings us to the other major sticking point: immigration and customs enforcement. Democrats want structural reforms to ICE before they agree to unconditional funding. They are pointing to recent high-profile incidents, including cases in Minneapolis and Chicago, and demanding things like mandatory body cameras, judicial warrants for searches, and visible IDs for field agents.
And importantly, Democrats are not trying to defund the rest of the department. They've actually offered, on the floor, to fund the TSA, the Coast Guard, the Cybersecurity Agency, and FEMA immediately. 9 times they've asked for unanimous consent to do that and keep negotiating the ICE portion separately.
But Republicans are standing firm. Republican Senator John Cornyn of Texas argued that you can't carve out the law enforcement wing of the department just because you disagree with its policies. The Republican argument is that refusing to fully fund ICE leaves the country severely vulnerable to security threats. They're highlighting recent kinetic attacks and cyber incidents, like the major hack on a medical device company in Michigan just this week, as proof that you need all 22 components of DHS functioning together.
Republican Senator Bernie Moreno of Ohio voiced his frustration with the standoff during the debate. Here is what he said. I find it deeply ironic, and quite frankly, I will use the word disgusting, that we here in the U.S. Senate are getting paid while 260,000 people aren't getting paid because of political shenanigans from the other side.
That quote gets right to the tension. Both sides are explicitly accusing the other of playing politics with frontline workers. And on the voting rights piece of this, the division is just as deep.
The SAVE Act provisions. Democratic Senator Angela Alsobrooks of Maryland argued that the proof of citizenship mandate would create significant hurdles, especially for married women who change their names, Native Americans using tribal IDs, or rural voters who don't easily have access to a passport office.
Not to mention the $165 fee to get a passport, which Democrats are comparing to a modern poll tax.
Alsobrooks said on the floor, there is no way to save America by silencing the voices of Americans. You save America by embracing the ideals that set us apart to begin with.
And Republican Senator Mike Lee of Utah pushed back hard on that. His argument is that the bill provides plenty of flexible alternatives for people who don't have a passport, like a sworn affidavit. He accused Democrats of ignoring the actual text of the bill to manufacture an issue.
It is a fundamental constitutional friction. You have Republicans arguing under Article 1 that the federal government has the authority to secure federal elections against non-citizen voting. And you have Democrats arguing that state-run systems already prohibit non-citizen voting. And these new federal mandates are just a backdoor to disenfranchisement.
There was even talk from Republican Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana about trying to bypass this entire gridlock using budget reconciliation.
Which is intriguing. Reconciliation is a procedural tool that lets you pass certain tax and spending bills with just 51 votes instead of 60. Kennedy wants to take the Democrats up on their offer to fund TSA and FEMA, and then use a reconciliation bill to fund ICE and pass the SAVE Act with a simple Republican majority.
But passing regular appropriations, let alone election mandates, through the strict rules of the reconciliation process is a legislative maze. The Senate parliamentarian would have to untangle all of it.
The Byrd rule challenges alone would take weeks, but the fact that they are openly discussing it shows how intractable this has become. While the two parties jockey for midterm messaging, the agency's essential workforce is caught in the middle. With the House in recess and primaries approaching, there is no clear path out of this at the moment. While everyone is shouting about the shutdown, there is actually some fascinating legislative maneuvering happening entirely under the radar today.
We are talking about biometric data, civil liberties, and crypto scams.
My absolute favorite combination of things to read about in the Congressional Record.
Let's start with the data piece. Democratic Senator Lisa Blunt Rochester of Delaware introduced an amendment today that specifically targets how the Department of Homeland Security handles genetic information.
The context here is the growing Fourth Amendment anxiety over modern surveillance. We know DHS collects huge amounts of data at the borders, at airports, during investigations. There has been a mounting fear among privacy advocates and civil liberties groups that the federal government could eventually try to build a centralized biometric database of U.S. citizens.
Which sounds like science fiction until you realize how fast the technology is moving. DNA sequencing gets cheaper every year. If you have a federal agency that already processes millions of people, the leap to collecting genetic markers isn't that far off.
Blunt Rochester's amendment draws a very hard line. It's short, but it's incredibly broad. It states, the Department of Homeland Security may not create, maintain, purchase, license, access, or otherwise obtain a database of information relating to the DNA of United States citizens.
That covers basically every possible loophole a federal agency might try to use. They can't build it themselves, sure. But more importantly, they can't buy it from a private data broker, they can't license it from a third party, they can't even rent access to an existing commercial database.
Correct. It's a preemptive strike against a technology that is moving way faster than federal privacy laws. And while that amendment is looking at constitutional boundaries, Democratic Senator Dick Durbin of Illinois introduced a proposal targeting a very modern vulnerability in consumer finance, specifically Bitcoin ATMs.
If you've been in a gas station or a convenience store lately, you have probably seen one of these crypto kiosks. They look just like normal ATMs, and unfortunately, they have become a major vector for wire fraud and romance scams.
Because of the anonymity they provide.
Exactly. Let's say a scammer convinces an elderly citizen that their bank account is frozen, or that a relative is in jail. They tell them to pull cash out of their bank and feed it into a Bitcoin ATM. That money is converted to virtual currency and sent to an untraceable wallet almost instantly. It totally bypasses all the traditional banking safeguards. There's no teller asking, "Are you sure you want to wire $10,000 to an unknown account?"
Durbin's amendment would require these operators to register all their physical locations with the Treasury Department. It also mandates that they hire an independent compliance officer. But the most interesting part is that it gives consumers a powerful new tool if they get defrauded.
Which almost never happens currently. Once crypto is gone, it's gone.
Precisely. But Durbin's bill puts the liability on the kiosk operators. Here is the text. Any person who knowingly denies a refund to a customer who is entitled to a refund pursuant to paragraph 1 shall be liable to the customer for 3 times the amount of the refund owed under that paragraph, or $10,000, whichever is greater.
Treble damages. That is a heavy hammer to swing at a kiosk operator. It essentially forces them to act as a backstop against fraud. The bill also mandates a 48-hour transaction freeze for new users. So if someone realizes they are being scammed, there's a physical window of time to stop the transfer.
It's striking. You have these lawmakers quietly trying to set tangible boundaries on rapid technological threats, protecting everyday Americans from genetic tracking and digital scams, even while the basic machinery of funding the federal government is fully stalled out.
Before we wrap up today, there was a moment in the chamber that really crystallized the reality of this impasse.
The Lujan moment.
Yeah. Democratic Senator Ben Ray Lujan of New Mexico was on the floor, and he echoed that same frustration about the chamber's paychecks. The U.S. senators who are shouting at each other across the aisle over these bills are still collecting their taxpayer-funded salaries,
while the dedicated staff actually keeping the airports and borders secure bear the financial burden of the shutdown. That's Floor Notes for today.
Until next session.